Hi, my name is Joao for drums Bonedo, and we're going to be talking about a kind of topic that came up real quick on my first interview on this channel, and that is sort of that, guess you can call it imposter syndrome or not feeling good enough. The topic that came about was when I was starting my journey through the jazz world and visiting jam sessions back when I lived in Berlin. And I remember that time, even though I really like going to jam sessions, and this is one of the places that I really learned how to play standards and play swing and learn the drums as a whole and put myself in situations that were uncomfortable. It was difficult at the time to sort of put into context or have some sort of balance between when I felt really good after playing and when I felt really trashy after playing. Because it felt like every time I came home, everything felt super shitty, and I really wasn't unhappy with myself. I was, can't really say that I was depressed, but it was a time of almost 4 to 5 years where every time I would play, I would be thinking about what I played, what I had just done, the decisions that I made while playing. Because, jazz and this improvised music is you're always taking decisions, and sometimes they are for the benefit of the music, sometimes they're not, but you don't really know until you have that experience. And that time I was collecting experience, and I would get very angry at myself, looking back, like in the bus ride home or in the train ride home, trying to go through, or listening to the recordings that I did. And bless the heart of my then girlfriend, because every time I would come home, I would vent to her and be like, "Oh my God, just the worst guy ever. I can't really play the drums. What the hell am I even doing here? I'm just gonna, even to the point where I remember thinking about, is this really something that I want to do? Is this really something that I want to go through every single time I go to jam session?" And I guess the only thing that carried me through that whole thing was the love of the game. I really so enjoyed jam sessions. And even though there is always a culture in jam session that is not always welcoming, and it's really difficult to get rid of that, I really do enjoy the progress that I could fairly quickly notice whenever I had played on stage and then went back to the rehearsal room and sort of noticed that things were a bit better. Little by little, I started getting used to the feeling of not being good, of not being like, couldn't really play what I was hearing in my mind. Because, at the time I was listening to so much Bill Evans. I had like a craziest Bill Evans, and the music was so pure and so nice. And all that I wished that I could play at that time was, can I just like be the pole motion that this music needs to be? And I couldn't, because maybe I was rushing, maybe I was dragging, or when it came down to play a solo, I would play too loud and then people would get uncomfortable, or I would get vibed off, or maybe things were nice, but those were decisions that I could have made better. And all those thoughts, all those situations would take place on that ride home. So I don't know, in the 45 minutes on the bus sitting there, I would talk myself into a state of complete destruction. And it was the worst thing ever. So that I would get home, it was already 1, 2, 3 in the morning, and I'd be trying to sleep and thinking about all the horrible world-ending decisions that I've made, and that helps nothing. And I get a lot of people, not only students, but like people that, seek out, because I think they see me as this approachable person. And if they hear that I went through this, which everybody does, I get a sense that a lot of people need to hear a little bit of that context. You don't really get to go where you are, where you want to be, if you don't go through the thing that this whole thought process. I started noticing a shift when I sort of, start gaining a little bit of traction in the scene. Would record something and didn't feel it was that bad. Or I remember very vividly the time I recorded myself at a gig and I put the metronome right next to the recorder, and I was always checking if I was rushing or I was dragging. And you cannot imagine how happy I was the first time I actually put the recording and then try to follow with the metronome, and I didn't have to change the metronome for the next 8 bars. There was like I could play solid time. And it was probably like 2 years into the whole like practicing every day, a lot of playing, a lot of jam sessions. I was so happy just for me to find out that, music is not, it doesn't have to be metronomically correct for it to work, and there is sort of a organic feeling that jazz has in itself, that you don't really have to have that metronomic time and be super perfect in everything you do. And as soon as I really started listening to this music and hearing like the mistakes or the like edginess, the risk that those players were taking, and sometimes those risks were not really paid off. Like sometimes you can hear Tony Williams taking risks and the band is like, whoa, what's going on? Sometimes you hear Elvin, sometimes you hear, well, not much Roy Haynes or some of those drummers, but you definitely can hear like people taking risks on stage. And as soon as I discovered that in this music, I was like, I guess I can be a little bit nicer to myself. So the whole imposter syndrome, that whole talking myself into a state of depression, I could start easing off. It still took me a long time. I had to go, not only like I work it through myself, but I had also outside encouragement. So like a couple of my teachers really saw what I was doing, also knew what I was sort of going through. And one of my teachers especially, he told me, stop practicing. You can only practice as much as you play live. Meaning, if I had a gig and I played 90 minutes worth of music, that is how much time I would be able to practice the next day. Because I was just practicing so much and spending so much time on my own, alone in a practice room, up to sometimes 10 hours on the summers, that, I would get too much in my head and not really have the live experience, that music making experience, that improvisation with other people experience, which is really crucial for this music. And as soon as I started getting more out there, as soon as I get out of my rehearsal space, out of my own head, and making those connections and trying to bridge that gap between me practicing and then actually putting that on, or try to put that over the on the stage, then things got better. To the point, I think one of the biggest encouragement for me was a recording that I did with a long-standing band that I had at the time, and I really liked the way I sounded on that. And the fact of the matter is that when today I hear recordings of myself that I did in the early days, I discovered they weren't that bad. They were actually pretty good. Some of them were, I had to admit, some are kind of more interesting than the stuff that I play now, because now I have a better understanding of drums, and the willingness to take risks diminished, which is crazy to think about. It's a whole different process, and it's a whole topic for another day. But staying true to who we are at the moment and trying to seek out, betterment, but in a very healthy manner, how we talk to ourselves. This has been the biggest game changer for me in my journey, trying to understand this music, play this music, and have a career in music.